2008, there came the Big Bang. Large financial institutions collapsed and governments had to bail out banks. The financial crisis shook up the economy, but also the media. Coverage of the economy in recent years has raised a set of questions like issues of trust, influence and accountability in journalism. However, what do financial journalists themselves think of their role in the financial crisis? In London, the city of global finance, two journalists of leading newspapers talk about their experiences.
I mean, let's not kid ourselves. No one saw what was the extent of what was coming.
And if the job of a journalist is partly to scrutinise, partly to see things that are wrong, partly to warn, if you will, they failed in that task, I'm afraid.
In Amsterdam, we asked the journalist of Het Financiële Dagblad several questions. Is it an advantage or a disadvantage to work in a city which is not in the center of the crisis?
I always start that discussion by saying that I didn't cover this subject before the summer of 2007, so it wasn't me.
I know that certain people here would disagree with me, but no one saw what was coming. And the problem is that, and we are, a lot of people say to me the Financial Times is equally, is complicit in that because you guys made these guys seem like they were masters of the universe, and no one really understood what was going on. And I think there were people doing great work. I think Gillian Tett was doing great work on CDOs, etc. I think there's many journalists here who are doing great work about, sort of early warning signs about the crisis.
Yes, that's a fair point. I think economic journalists and financial journalists, many of them did not see this coming. It was true, and there were very few journalists who said that the world was running up too much debt, or mortgage-backed securities were a danger, or the banks were being run in a really unsafe fashion. Very, very few journalists, if any, saw that, I'm afraid.
In general, you could say yes, but okay, if so, and well, many others made that mistake as well. They didn't have blind eye.
In an effort to sort of simplify things for readers a lot of times in financial journalism and sort of to make it understandable because it is so complex, there isn't as much going into the detail as perhaps there should be. And I think that is a big issue.
Well, you can make excuses, I think, and there would be a number of reasons. I mean, one excuse would be to say that journalistic resources were squeezed, jobs being lost, people having to work harder, so they can't explore or investigate things so well. But I think that's a bit of an alibi, really. I think that basically journalists are no different to economists or bankers. They operate with a slight herd instinct. And no one would want to go out on a limb and say, look, there's a crash around the corner, it's going to be terrible. There is safety in numbers, as we say, and there was the pack mentality is certainly there in journalism, in different types of journalism, and it's certainly there in economic journalism.
And we only started understanding what it all was, and I remember that quite clearly in the fall of 2007, so after the start of the credit crisis, what conduits were and what secularization means and how and all these waterfall layers and all those things. I mean, CDOs, my God, CDO Square, all those things we never entered into that.
I think that we work really hard to be tough and to be fair. And tough can come out wrong, and sort of you say, it's not that we go into a story thinking we're going to be really tough on this. We go into a story thinking, I'm not going to take what someone says to me at face value. I'm going to hear what they say to me, but I'm going to also talk to a million different people about that, see if that stands up, and then, write about what people think across the panoply of opinions, and I think that's the key to financial journalism.
With the economy, for many, many years, the economy wasn't a very big story, and now it changed, and it meant that you did more work. Yes, it was harder work, but the work was more interesting, more challenging, and it was more important. And the economy stories, as I say, tended to go at the front of the paper rather than at the back.
Well, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, isn't it? I mean, perhaps I now think that I have the right balance. I struck the right balance. That might be so. But perhaps it turns out after 1 year that I have been blind in October 2011. I mean, in the end, you never know. I hope we have a distance, and we try to keep it like that. But on the other hand, I mean, you need phone numbers.
We talk a lot at this paper about how we could have done some things better, and we talk a lot about how we can do things better moving forward. And I mean, we might be in another crisis right now.
We didn't have any big sort of ethical discussions. One of the difficulties is a lot of economic stories are quite subtle, and there's nuanced, if you like, and you have to try and explain the sort of theoretical or the practical background to it. I mean, if you have a thing like quantitative easing, as they call it, or so-called printing money, you have to try and explain that. And the extent to which you do that and how you do that are things that we would discuss, yeah.
As a journalist, you have to be humble, and as a Dutch journalist, you have to be even more humble. I mean, of course, when there will be a deal between Goldman Sachs and whoever, I mean, we will not be the first to cover that. That's easy. I mean, it's easy to understand. To know, to understand a bit how it works, and what the main interests are in that particular field. You have to know all those sources. So, yeah, the art of the job is to get not too close to them, but on the other hand, make sure that they give you all the information you need. And that's something, it's not so easy to solve.
The crisis has definitely left people with such a huge degree of skepticism about anything anyone says.
Not just journalists, but the generation that grew up, so to speak, in this crisis and will continue to grow up in this crisis, they will hopefully remember it, and they will hopefully learn from it, and they will hopefully find it informing their day-to-day lives.
I think now journalists are more critical towards what is on the balance sheet, what are the presentations like, more critical than they were 3 or 4 years ago. So it was an industrial building. This used to be very well known car drive. This was the import company for